Hello and welcome to the 45th episode of When I Was Your Age, a podcast celebrating the careers, callings, and creativity of some friends of mine. I'm your host, Roland Parker, and as always, it's a joy, a pleasure, and a treat to have you here. Today's guest is a good friend of mine from college, Kate Liggett. We are very aligned in our love of the outdoors and working in camps, so I'm really excited to talk with her about how exactly she got into that world. Before we bring Kate into the stream, as always, we've got some housekeeping. If you are not already, make sure that you follow us on Instagram. You can do that at WIWYA pod. Thank you guys so much for the support. We are currently at 1,565 followers on Instagram. We have 52 followers on Spotify, which is a place that you can follow us if you want to listen. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and you can watch episodes on YouTube as well. If you've been here before, welcome back. Make yourself at home. And if you're here for the first time, thanks for checking us out. We really appreciate it. All the links for all of those places that I've mentioned are on the link tree in the Instagram bio. So you can go check out all of those spots. And I think that's going to conclude our housekeeping. So we'll go ahead and bring Kate in. Kate, how's it going with you? What have you been up to?
I'm doing pretty good. It's holiday season's been kind of crazy. I've been traveling a lot. Went to Boston for Christmas and spent that with my in-laws, which was super fun. And then I spent a week in Tennessee for New Year's with my family.
Amazing, love that. Did the dog make all the trips with you?
He didn't make it to Christmas, but he did make it to the week-long Tennessee trip.
Nice, excellent. Did he go to Dollywood?
He did not go to Dollywood. I don't think he would have done very well with the crowds there.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's been a long time since I've actually been to Dollywood, but like working in Pigeon Forge for so long, it feels like I would have been like very recently, but I don't think that I have been since I was like a kid.
Yeah, I think I went one time in college, but then before that, I was probably like 9 the last time I went.
Gotcha. Well, what have you been into this past week? Just kind of getting into the rhythm of work again, or what's going on?
Yeah, I got a new tattoo early this week, which was a lot of
Okay,
fun. It's a possum as a knight.
a possum as a knight. Oh,
Yeah.
lovely.
Um,
Okay,
and
I've got to interject and say my brother he has a possum as an Ouroboros. Um, so it's the possum eating its own ratty
yeah,
kind of tail. So yeah, it's a shout out to Max. He was on the podcast a little bit ago. But yeah, love that.
nice. Yeah, and then just kind of my job right now is with a nonprofit, and this is my reporting season. My grant year just wrapped up, so that's been taking up a lot of my like brain power this
Mm.
week. Is just getting that grant report ready.
Nice. Excellent. Well, if you all aren't already, make sure that you open up your phones and follow Kate on Instagram. You can see that handle up there in the stream if you're watching, and we'll have it in the description of the episode as well. Kate, tell me, have you ever had any like crazy usernames? This one's pretty straightforward, just first name, last name. I'm in the first name, last name crowd as well. But was there ever a time that you had something that was a little more out there?
I gotta think about that. Oh, I don't know if I've ever had any really crazy ones. Maybe at some point on like Apple gaming or something like that that wasn't like a serious
Yeah,
username. I probably at some point was Killer Kate, which
Killer
stemmed
Kate.
from our freshman orientation group in college.
Oh
When
yeah,
I couldn't think of an adjective that started with a K.
that's very funny. So just to for those who don't know or maybe have forgotten, we were doing the introductory freshman orientation kind of get to know you games. We're going around adding adjectives, I think alliterative or not, to our names to kind of uh, bounce around that kind of vibe. Kate says Killer Kate. I say rock and rollin'. I think I added like a little motion to it for which I was teased. Um, but I think that there was a rumor after the fact that kind of resulted because you had a it was the combination of you had a paw print tattoo of of your dog, and
Yeah.
then the combination of you saying Killer Kate. There was a rumor that you killed your dog. Am I getting that right?
I remember that rumor, and I think I found out about that rumor, like, way later than you did, and I was just like I thought the absurdity of it was so funny.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, like, what a weird rumor, and not true.
Yeah, yeah. It's there, and in college, there are so many more interesting true things that you could, um, that you can learn. Um, so that's so funny. I that just jumped out at me as soon as you said,
Yeah.
um, Killer Kate. That's very funny. Love that. Well, Kate, I've got some get to know you questions. I know you very
Mhm.
well, but let's help out the folks who are listening. Um, well, let's start off. Where are you from and where do you currently live?
Yeah, so I grew up mainly I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee until I was 9, and then moved to Pace, Florida, little town in the Florida Panhandle. And I have lived a lot of different places before finally landing in Massachusetts about 3.5 years ago. And or no, about 3 years ago. And now I'm living in Great Barrington, Massachusetts.
Excellent. And you may you aside from like military personnel, you may be a person in my life who has held the most residences. Um, so I one day we'll need to make a map with like some all of the journey points. But
Yeah,
other notables, Hawaii.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that excellent. Well,
yeah.
we love to see it.
There was that
Um,
time in 2020 when I got laid off and lived in my car for a bit and hit like 30 different states within 3 months.
Amazing. We love that. So we touched on it already, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later in the podcast. But what do you do?
So I am the apprenticeship coordinator for Railroad Street Youth Project, which is a small nonprofit youth center in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Um, the word youth, I feel like, is a little bit of a misnomer because we actually work with people up to 25. So really youth and young adults. But um, yeah, so I run basically like a kind of career vocational education program outside of any sort of like formal school.
Excellent. And how old are you? Big theme of the podcast for us is age. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I am 28.
Perfect. Yeah, it's uh, and this is the first time I've recorded in a while, but I do kind of always remember we've reached that age where it's like you got to think for like half a second.
Yeah, like
Um,
wait a second.
I was doing that the other day. So I feel you there. What piece of media are you currently enjoying? So book, podcast, music, TV show, other form, other medium. What is that to you?
So my wife has been getting me into Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Okay.
which I like maybe watched like the first season of it when I was in high school, but she was really into it. So we started watching that. And then along with that, we've also started watching Angel, which is like the spin-off show.
Okay. Gotcha. I am not super familiar. I know kind of like vaguely that's about it. But yeah, how are you liking it so far?
I love it. Great storyline. Horrible, just like 90s special effects, which is so much fun to watch.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, like when like a normal looking human transforms into like a demon. It's just like it looks so fake. It's so funny to watch. But it's like a really fun plot to follow, and it's definitely like it's got the whole like monsters, supernatural stuff, but I'm not really into like the horror genre. I don't like to be scared for entertainment.
Mm.
So it stays well out of that realm.
Yeah, yeah, same. It's at you and I. We're alike in that respect. Um, I respect horror as a genre, and I can appreciate how it's captivating.
Yeah.
Um, I it's not worth it to me. I like sleeping. It's a so I don't want to let that go.
Yeah.
What's something that you'd consider a luxurious necessity?
Mm. I was just thinking about this earlier because I knew you were going to ask it. Um, and I've had a hard time coming up with one.
Sure.
Um,
For me, I tend to think of the realm of, like, something that kinda blurs the lines between, like, a need and a want. So for
yeah.
me, I like I can only have so poor a quality of coffee,
Mhm.
that, like, I wouldn't be able to go much lower, but I'm still gonna have it as a part of my morning routine.
Yeah.
Um, so I've set up a system in place to where I have the worst cup of coffee I can have is acceptable to me,
Yeah.
in the morning. So, I don't know if that pushes
Okay.
you along to where you need to be, but
Yeah. I think maybe like having a smartphone, which might
mm,
sound absurd because I feel like so many people it's like, well, I need the smartphone for so many things, but I feel like I don't actually need one. I mean, like I have a work phone that my job gives to me that has like email and all that stuff on it. So I don't really need like a personal smartphone, but like I love my iPhone and I'm never gonna get rid of it, even though sometimes I get fed up with like the amount of time I spend just like scrolling on Instagram and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just get a flip phone and
yeah,
won't have to worry about this anymore. But I never
time
do.
to break out the jitterbug.
With the giant
Yeah,
keys.
yeah. It's a no, I feel that, and it's escaping me at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that somebody else on the podcast has said that answer before, and I think it's a good one. Um, do you have any bits that you're doing? Any running jokes with you, and your wife or close friends or work coworkers? Tell me about that.
Mm, that's a good question.
I'll tell you one for me. This is
Yeah.
less a bit that I, like, created and more than one that I've fallen into is that if I, like, give instructions to my kids, like,
Mhm.
"Okay, like, we're gonna go get ready for bed." They're like, "No." And I'll just like, "Yes." And, like, it's usually the same tone and cadence. So
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of become a bit because it's the familiarity of it,
Yeah.
but only because they make me.
Um, I okay, so I have might sound a little weird, but I have this coworker that so in the youth center where I work, we have um just it's basically like a section of the youth center that has basically like the cubicle walls, but instead of surrounding individual desks, it just surrounds the area where all the youth workers have desks. So it's like one sectioned off area that like relatively small area that we're all just like sitting in there together in. And so one of my coworkers, she likes to just like save pictures of her that are really unflattering. Um, and so there was one particular picture that I took when I was just like testing out a camera for work for like taking pictures of a program I had later. Um, and just like caught one of her when she wasn't paying attention and she thought it was really funny. And then I made that picture the like desktop background on my computer. And it's since spiraled from there. And now I have like multiple pictures printed out of her hanging up on the cork board over my computer, which I did not print all of them. The latest one she printed out, and I like just came into work one day and there was this new picture of Gabby on there. So that's become like a running kind of bit in the office. And when the
Nice.
newest one popped up, one of our other coworkers was like, Kate, at what point is this workplace harassment? And I was like, no, Gabby put that one there.
That's funny. The bit that keeps building and it's collaborative is one that lasts.
Yeah.
It's a and is strong. So I love that. That's great. Okay, next question here. I really love getting to ask because we get to save all of the answers into an archive, into a playlist altogether, and you can get this mosaic of all of these answers. So, if you were to replace the national anthem with any song on your playlist, any song you might have had on your iPod Shuffle, what song would that be? And tell me a little bit about that.
Hmm. That's another great question. I feel like maybe a Noah Khan song.
Okay.
Um,
Anything specific or just any Noah Khan song?
I mean, I feel like Stick Season is a song that really captivated a lot of people. But that maybe feels a little more relevant for me living up in New England where we have a long stick season where there's just no leaves on the trees.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel like it also just speaks to this like collective of our generation of this kind of like feeling a little hopeless or maybe a lot hopeless about things, but also like we're just gonna still keep going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think especially when the song was really starting to become popular in like the early days of it catching a lot of wheels on TikTok, it like kept like showing up for me. Um, that was obviously like when it resonated with me a lot.
Mm.
Um, and it still has this really incredible staying power. I think you're right. It speaks to so a lot of the feelings of our generation really well. It's very poignant in that way. Um, well, if you want to hear Kate's answer or some other answers too, then you can go to the in the link tree. There is a national anthem playlist opportunity. You can go and follow that. It's called WIWYA, and then it's like rah with a American eagle and American flag. So you can find that on Spotify if you're an Apple Music listener. So sorry. Maybe eventually we'll get there. I am just not going to pay for 2 subscriptions. There's that. Love that. Great answer. And then last question is, how do we know each other?
So we met like first day of college in our freshman orientation group where we um went camping and whitewater rafting together at the beginning. And I would say more specifically on the bus, I was like the bus to the campsite for the trip. I was like 19 years old, fresh off my first summer as a camp counselor and trying to like impress everyone around me with all my get to know you things. And so I was telling riddles. Um, and Tabby, who is now your wife, was like, I am going to get this cute guy I just met to help me solve riddles. And that was you. So,
It was. It's a key foundational moment in our relationship. And even when I think back on that moment and how I felt about it, I was like, oh, she's just being nice. This is how she is with everybody. So if you're picturing this moment and you're like, oh, Roland's got some game. He's trying to that's it. He's acting all chill about it. They're solving riddles. No, not the case.
no.
I was crapping my pants in the most romantic way possible.
I think my favorite part of the just like that kind of when we were all getting to know each other and there was like freshman orientation and you were just completely clueless even though everyone else knew that Tabby was into you was when she tried to get you to like go on a date with her and you basically invited everyone to come on the
Mhm.
date.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very funny to think about now. Yeah, it's and thank God it didn't stick. The blatant rejection, the hedging of bets, because so just as a reference, Tabby I had never been to a cookout before, regional fast food restaurant, and we were talking about it in the whitewater rafting session. She says, "Oh, we should go," as in you and I, me and you, on a date. And I said, "Yeah, we should all go." And I gestured to the whole raft. So it shows what I know. Now, even though I failed in that aspect, we still ended up in the right spot. So very very thankful for that. But I appreciate you dredging up these these sore memories.
Anytime.
Well, let's kind of start a little bit more with your story. So tell me about summer camp. You mentioned that, you know, coming into freshman year of college, 19 years old, like that's the first summer where you've worked as a camp counselor. Maybe if you could draw point A to point B being now, like tell me on a very basic level about your journey, like working in camps.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's hard to put it into super basic because it's been such a like winding path to get to where I am right now.
Sure.
Um, but I think it really started like when I was a little kid. Just growing up, like um we had a TV, but we had like the bunny ear antennas. We didn't have like cable or satellite, and so I always like credit that for how outdoorsy I am because it was like there's nothing else to do but go outside and like climb a tree. Um, and then my parents also just like always had us outside like kayaking and hiking, and I went rappelling off a 100-foot cliff when I was 5 years old, which is like wild and was so much fun. And so I think just like having that background, it felt really natural to go to working at summer camp the summer after I graduated high school. Um, and then kind of stuck from there. I like worked at that camp for 2 summers, and then I worked at a camp in Pennsylvania on their adventure staff after I kind of got started working with Mountain Challenge at our college, which um, for anyone who doesn't know, that was at Marable College. Mountain Challenge is essentially like the outdoor recreation program on campus, but it's also its own separate company, and so employs students to run like outdoor trips for other students, so like rock climbing and kayaking and hiking and all that sort of stuff. But then also run like ropes courses for corporate groups and that sort of, and get paid pretty well for a college student, especially doing those trips. So I kind of like rolled from there into more the adventure side of things. I ended up in New Zealand for a summer, doing kind of like teaching life skills, job skills, social skills to young adults with disabilities. And then that rolled into, I like thought for a long time I wanted to be like a recreational therapist. And so I ended up out in Hawaii working for probably the worst job I've ever had, for a company that I'm not going to name here because I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't really know
Sure.
how all
I
of that
appreciate
works,
it.
but like definitely the worst job I've ever had, working for a residential treatment center in Hawaii that was just like horribly managed and not at all what I was promised when I moved across the world to take the job. Um, and yeah, so like spend some time there, kind of in like a garden, like a glorified garden that they called a farm. Um, and then from there, I just found like a Facebook post for this outdoor education company in New England, and was like, "Oh, I've never spent much time in New England." I like drove through there on this big road trip I did in 2020, but um, I'll try it out. And it was the spring of 2021. So this outdoor education company that was doing typically did overnight programs where like schools would bring like their entire fifth grade to this camp that Nature's Classroom, the company I was working for, would rent out for like a full week and just do a bunch of different like nature and science-based education stuff. So they couldn't do that because of the pandemic. And so it was this like, they called it Nature on Wheels, where we were driving to the schools all over New England and New York and trying to teach outdoor education at schools to like varying degrees of success, depending on what outdoor spaces the schools had. And I was like, that sounds kind of crazy and fun. Like I could do that for one season. And then I came out and I met my wife. And so and I also fell in love with working that job, like working in outdoor education and working for that company specifically is like probably the best company I've ever worked for. So like a stark comparison coming from like the worst company I've worked for into the best one. And yeah, so then I was doing the kind of seasonal life for like 3-ish years. So the outdoor education was just like in the fall and the spring. My wife, who at the time like wasn't even my girlfriend, was just this like person I was seeing for like a couple weeks, was like, oh, you should come work at my summer camp. And so I followed her to that camp, which I ended up working out for like 2 summers. Eventually we like figured it out that she was my girlfriend. And then
That's good.
you
Good to be
know,
on the same page.
yeah. And I feel like my job in a way like really fast tracked my relationship too, because just like the nature of the work we were doing, we were like living with each other after dating for like 6 months. And yeah, so I did that seasonal life for like 3 years. I didn't work in the winters, which was so much fun. I just got to like travel and come visit you and Tabby a couple times, which was super fun. And then essentially got to a point like probably last fall, where I was like, okay, this is really fun. I really love this job, but also like this is not a sustainable lifestyle. And so I started looking for kind of similar work. There wasn't really a lot in the outdoor world that I was finding that's like year-round work in one place and has health insurance and like kind of those basic things that you want from a job when you want that kind of stability. And so I just like almost literally stumbled across the place where I work now. I was literally just like driving past and saw the sign on the youth center and was like, oh, Railroad Street Youth Project. That sounds kind of cool. And looked into it, and they have this really great mission of like being youth led and really empowering young people, and like catering their programs based on what young people are actually saying they need out of the programs, which is not something you see in a lot of like youth serving organizations. And so I thought that was really cool. And then like less than a month later, I think they posted a job. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like perfect timing. So I applied and have been where I am for about a year now.
Amazing. That's it. Well, thank you for kind of laying it all out there. You mentioned the winding pieces of it all. Kind of going from place to place. Like it, when you look back on it now, like it makes sense. Like how you've kind of found yourself here. Knowing what you know now, would you have taken a different route to get to this point? Would you have skipped any of the steps, or would you? Tell me about that.
I don't think I would have. Because I don't know if I would have ended up where I am right now if I had skipped any of the steps.
Sure.
I mean, one thing I joke about a lot is like I graduated from college in December of 2018, and I still have not had a job that required a college degree yet. Which like occasionally I'm like, what was the point of that? But I mean, I met amazing people like you and people that are so important to my life, and I think also just learned so much from, uh, like, the people that I interacted with in college and also from working with Mountain Challenge,
Hmm.
and Bruce, the founder of Mountain Challenge, obviously has been, like, this huge mentor in my life, and yeah, there's just, like, so many connections that I never would have made if I had skipped that. Um, I don't think I would even skip the worst job I ever had because I got to live in Hawaii for, like, 2 years and,
Yeah.
met some of my closest friends of my, yeah, just some of my closest friends working out there. We were just kind of all in this, like, shitty situation together, but living in a beautiful place and, um, really made the best of it. Yeah, I don't think I would change anything.
Yeah, amazing. Well, one thing that I've always kind of admired for in you and been fearful of is your ability to just kind of pack up and be like, yeah, it'll be fine. Like I'll just go and do it. Like it, and that's as exemplified in all of the different places that you've lived and the jobs that you've held. I just remember kind of, especially post college, kind of whenever we would check in, be like, okay, so you've held how many jobs since we last talked? And you've lived in how many states since we last talked? Just remember that being a regular checkpoint. Um, was that something that was always in you, just an ability to be like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Let's just go and do it. Or was there an element of like, I'm pretty scared about this, but I'm going to lean into it. Tell me about that.
I feel like for the most part, it's always been just like, yeah, it'll be fun. And just kind of go do it. I think ironically, the probably the change I was most anxious about was leaving seasonal work behind.
Okay.
Um, the just because that's like the life I've known since graduating from college is like living somewhere new and doing a different job and all this stuff like so frequently and even um like I said, I lived in Hawaii for 2 years. I didn't actually like stay there the full 2 years because I like got laid off from my job, and then I went to Pennsylvania and did this massive road trip and then went back to Hawaii and was like living in a bunch of different places while I was there. And so the like even when I was in the same place there wasn't a lot of consistency. um And I feel like I thrived in that for a long time,
Hmm.
um, to the point where I was like, "I'm giving up a lot of freedom to have consistency." Um, just, like, this freedom to like, if I didn't wanna work for a season, I could just not work, and then I still would have a job with the same, like, seasonal organization the next season if I wanted to come back. Um, and so, like, I think giving up that piece of like, oh, I it's not as easy to just be like, oh, I'm gonna go travel for 3 months and not really work, or and giving up a little bit of the financial freedom too of like when all the time I was doing seasonal work, I wasn't paying for food, I wasn't paying for housing, like
Yeah.
for most of the year. So it was just like I could just save up my money and then live off of it the any seasons that I didn't work. Um, And so, now I'm like, I have to pay for rent and I have to pay for groceries and like all these other expenses, but
More
I do
anchored.
think it's been worth it, even though it was the hardest transition.
Yeah. It's amazing. Well, and I'm sure that so much of your work is working with people who have been in, or sorry, let me start over. Working with people, young adults, college age workers who are kind of just starting out in their outdoor work kind of careers, outdoor education careers. Have any of them approached you with like, hey, you've lived kind of all over, or you've like been willing to kind of jump around to all of these things? Like, tell me how you did it. Like, have you had any moments like that where people come for guidance in that respect?
I've had a little bit. I think I'd say a lot of the like youth and young adults I work with right now don't really know that much about my like past life as a
Sure.
seasonal worker. The, ones I've connected more with, have definitely heard about it. I've had a couple people ask some kind of questions about like, how did you get started in that? And what's it like to not like really have a home and be moving on like this frequently, and kind of gotten those sorts of things. But um yeah, I think I've had a couple, but I think a lot of them just kind of like, it's like when you meet someone in a certain context and you only see them in that context, you kind of only think of them that way. So I think
Very true.
a lot of them like more so just think of me as like, oh, okay, it's just like one of the youth workers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. Do you feel that people have like a solid grasp on what you do, like you're calling like this is something that I've kind of noticed recently with people our age and probably but people a little bit older than us as well, is that they have heard it described what their friends do, but could not maybe solidly nail down um, what it is. So do you feel like your friends or family, like they could spout back at least a basic kind of summary of, oh, Kate does this, and I know it entails probably these things.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just based off of like, well, Kate runs an apprenticeship program at a youth center. Like, I think people could probably make some guesses is what that is, but it's just such general terms. I feel like a lot of people probably in my life probably couldn't like really articulate exactly what it is I do. Um, Partially because yeah, it's just such general terms that like that could encompass a lot of different things, but also because there are a lot of aspects of my job that don't necessarily fall under the apprenticeship program. Like I teach sex ed in two different high schools, and like you probably would never guess that from apprenticeship coordinator.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, let's talk through then. Just I'm sure that the day to day is not identical every single day, but like let's talk about like some of the day to day responsibilities. What does it kind of look like for you to be in this role?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier my role is funded by a grant. So I have like specific numbers I need to hit. I'm supposed to have like at least 60 participants a year in apprenticeships, through like I think at least 8 apprenticeships throughout the year. I can do more, but um, the apprenticeships are, and I feel like they're not true apprenticeships, but the in my organization there are these like 6 to 8 week, um, basically like crash courses on different careers. Um, and so we have like a really long standing culinary apprenticeship, and then everything else is really like what I can find and what young people are interested in. So we cover a lot of different stuff. There's like ceramics and a lot of different art things. We um, have done one with an animal sanctuary where people are learning like how to work with different animals, how to do like maintenance on a farm. We're working on getting some more kind of like naturalist outdoor education style apprenticeships out there. So a big part of my job is really like finding apprenticeships, which means finding people to run them, which can be difficult because it's an entirely volunteer basis for
Right.
people to run these, and it's like all people outside of the organization. So sometimes, and the organization I work for has been around since I think it was founded in '99, and it's a relatively small community, so people have heard of Railroad Street Youth Project. Um, so a lot of times I'll run into people who are like, "Oh yeah, the organization has done so much good stuff in the past, however many years that is, what, like 25 or something like that,
Yeah.
35? I don't
Yeah.
know, count.
That's
25.
that's good.
Um,
Yeah, 25 is good. I like good round number. I think it's right too.
yeah. Um, yeah, and so I'll run into people who are, like, excited about it, but I'll also run into people who are like, "Oh, what's in it for me? Like, what do I get out of running this apprenticeship?"
Sure.
And I'm like, "That's, I think a fair thing to ask if it's taking part of your especially like small business owners, it's like taking up part of your day. And a lot of our people who are running apprenticeships work for or run small businesses. And it can definitely be challenging to like fit that into your workday. But so there's a lot of like finding new people to run apprenticeships, working with people who've done it before. Um, and then with that, there's like some people have already been working with youth and young adults and are really good at it, and some people are not so much. And so there's like a lot of coaching on how to run the apprenticeship. Um, I go to all of the apprenticeships, which is actually a really fun part of the job.
Sure.
So usually they are about 2 hours long and we'll meet once a week. And so, um, like for example, the ceramics apprenticeship we did last January, I basically just like went and got to learn how to throw pottery on a wheel,
Oh,
which
nice.
was like super cool. And I was like, wow, I'm getting paid to do this right now. Um, but I'm mostly there to kind of do the youth work side of things, like if conflicts come up or um, just making sure like the people running the apprenticeship are treating the young people in the apprenticeship with respect, because that's definitely something we run into is just like adults not respecting young people as much. Um, so those sorts of things. There's like doing a lot of outreach for apprenticeships, going into schools. Like I'd say at least 3 times a week, I go into the 2 local high schools during lunch, and just like I'm that annoying adult that walks around with flyers at the high school lunch and is like, "Hey, come do my program," um, to varying degrees of accepting that I'm
Sure.
talking to them during their lunch break. um, yeah, so there's so many other things that fall into that with like we have a drop-in center that we all take turns hosting. I mentioned earlier that I teach sex ed in 2 of the high schools, which is really fun. We like teach the all the ninth grade students in the surrounding towns every year. So that's like a kind of a cool, interesting part of the job.
Nice, amazing. Well, every time I found myself like reaching out to like start a question, you were like answering like that one, like go like very. That was a very good flow of the way that you were kind of laying those things out there. So
Thank you.
if you didn't know before, you know very clearly now what it is that Kate does. No, that's amazing. How do you handle like some of those rejection kind of components? Like I think on both sides, like with the students, like you've got to kind of get them to buy into it. You got to be the weird adult like walking around handing out flyers, like you mentioned, but then also like trying to cultivate new relationships, like in the community, in like in these apprenticeships, like developing the new relationships, getting um, new things that the young people are interested in, because I imagine that, like, there's some resources that, you can keep going back to that well. There are folks that you can really heavily rely on, and things that are always gonna be interesting to young people in that way. Um, but you gotta get creative, I would think too, with some of the new, initiatives that you're trying to get started. So I don't know. Long-winded ask,
Yeah.
but, how do you deal with, like, the rejection on, like, um, the apprenticee,
Yeah.
the
Apprentice.
the 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 business or program that's hosting the apprentice and the new kids that you're trying to bring in?
Yeah. So I mean, as far as like with the young people I'm trying to bring in, I do have the advantage of being relatively young myself. Like I'm only 3 years older than our oldest participants, with our like 14 to 25 range. Also, the other day, one of the high school students I work with told me that she thought I was like 22, and I was like, "Wow, thank you."
I can be 22. Nice.
Definitely a compliment there. Um, so I do think that's an advantage in dealing with the like when students are maybe a little like hesitant to like interact with me, is like at least I look relatively young, and so it's like okay, maybe I'll give her a
Yeah.
chance. But
Because
we
otherwise it's very, like, hello, fellow kids, like the Steve
Yeah.
Buscemi with the skateboard on the is that
Yeah,
kinda going around? Yeah.
exactly. They're like, "Who is this old person?" Um, but we joke around at the youth center about my coworker called it like the youth worker baptism is essentially like the first time you get made fun of or bullied by a youth as a youth worker. um, so it's kind of like an inevitability.
Yeah.
Like the teenagers are gonna make fun of you and think that you're cringy, and so it's kind of just something that you have to like accept and sometimes lean into. Um, you don't want to lean into it too much and like actively try to be super cringy, but um like in a humorous way once you get to that point of just like, I'll like misuse some of the terms. I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
like I don't
You
know what skibbity toilet means, but
Oh, no.
like
Yeah,
when I
that's
say
one I've
it,
never
it's
gotten.
definitely I definitely use it wrong. So
Nice.
some kind of leaning into that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just like there's a certain point where I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna let like this 16-year-old get under my skin.
Yeah. You're
Like
not
I
the
have
boss
better
of
things
me
to
and
do.
how I feel.
Yeah,
I know the work that I do is important, and you can't tell me that it's not. Yeah,
exactly.
that
Um,
that's fun.
and then on the side with like businesses and just like people in the community when I'm trying to get them to run apprenticeships. Um, the Yeah, I feel like there have definitely been some points where, like I said earlier, I'm based on specific numbers. Like I have to hit a certain number of apprenticeships and a certain number of participants. And so like there's a certain level of, especially during like busy outreach times where if I like go to a business and they're like, what's in this for me? Or like I don't or just like a flat out no. Um there's a certain level of like, I don't have time to dwell on this. I just need to move on to the next one. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, I think that's like the biggest thing is I'm just like, oh, whatever. Like, I'll just ask the next person. There's always like, you have those like jokes with your coworkers that you would never actually say out loud to anyone, to other people of you like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this guy was just like, what's in it for me? Like, what a selfish asshole," and like all that stuff. And it's like, it's not really how I feel, but like just kind of letting off the steam in the moment of rejection um, with my coworkers rather than like,
Yeah.
putting that on someone else. Um, so definitely like some bit of humor in there.
Yeah, it's a definitely. That's one piece of I think any career that would be a kind of an initial challenge for me. Just I think, exposure therapy, you get used to it, but any kind of like cold call situation like that, kind of generating a relationship like out of nothing is something
Mhm.
that is very intimidating to me. So I can appreciate that it's like, all right, we gotta do it.
Yeah.
Especially in the busy times like you mentioned. Um, amazing. Um, well, totally lost for questions here. You keep cutting me off with the things that I wanna ask, and it's a little bit rude, Kate, if I'm honest.
I'm so sorry.
Um, I know, that's okay. Well, here's the deal. If I've run out of questions, then what we'll do is this. I'll just concede to someone who has probably a pretty good question, and we'll go with that. So we've got a history or tradition of asking questions to the next guest. So I'll give you the same opportunity after we do this. But I've got a question from Jenny Habib.
Mhm.
And her question is, what innovation or piece of technology has changed your life? So I don't know. You mentioned the phone piece, which kind of leans into this question already, but I'm wondering if there are maybe some other things that you could identify. Maybe it's more delving a little more deeply into the phone, or it's a completely different focus altogether.
Um, This is going to be like a very broad definition of technology for this, but I would say the whiteboard
Okay.
um, has definitely changed my life. I am someone who struggles so much with like organization and time management. Like I didn't find out I had ADHD until I was like 22, um, which
Yeah.
is pretty late to find out. Um, and so the whiteboard has just been so big in my like personal life organization and my work life organization. I'm like looking over at my fridge right now that has literally just like a list of the things that are in the fridge so I don't
Yeah.
forget about them before they go bad,
Oh,
and like the whiteboard calendar that we have on the fridge to keep up with like important dates and not have to remember to buy a calendar every year. And then at work, I have this big whiteboard on my desk, and it's split into 4 different sections. Um, and so one section is things to do today, then there's things to do this week, things to do this month, and then there's like um where I'm keeping track of how many basically like my numbers for the year, like how many
yeah.
apprenticeships I've had, how
Okay.
many participants. Um and that just like helps keep me on track when I'm able to like I literally can't not see it because the whiteboard's like bigger than my computer and it like
Yeah.
sits right there beside the computer. Um, yeah, that's been huge.
Uh, no, amazing. You're speaking to my soul, because I'm not diagnosed, but I have identified several behaviors or patterns within myself that um, kind of fall into some of those categories. And the object permanence of like having the list in front of you is such a key thing.
Yeah.
Um, this past calendar year, I've been like writing things down physically and crossing them off so much more than I ever have in my life, and
Mhm.
it's been really like spiking my work productivity and like doing things around the house. And um yeah, it's life changing. And you would never, I don't know, like it feels really dumb to say like, oh, I started writing things down and that really helped, because it's like, well, yeah, like duh, but like also can't you just remember? It's so silly,
Yeah.
but like still somehow magical. It's a very fun, funny, infuriating thing that like I gotta get out my little pen and pad and do it, but like it makes things so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. No, I love that. I didn't know where we were going with the whiteboard, but I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's such a good like just innovation for that way. And I think especially in kind of keeping yourself on track in that sense.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Pretty great.
well, I want to extend the same opportunity to you now. Whoever we have on next, what's a question that you might like to ask them? I feel like you got a good few up your sleeve, you know, working as a facilitator and working in camps for so long, telling riddles, around in that way. So, what's something you might like to ask to whoever shows up next?
Um, I think I'm gonna go with my favorite icebreaker question,
Okay.
which is if you were riding into battle, what would you ride into battle on?
Hmm,
Could be a real or made up creature.
nice. Yeah, that's good. I feel like you've definitely asked me that before.
Oh
Gosh,
yeah.
that's uh, that's a good one. I love those kinds of questions too, where there's an element of whimsy
Mm,
that you make people be a little creative, because I think it cuts to the core of just who a person is, like
mm,
with some of these questions.
yeah.
You can tell, especially at the beginning of like a group facilitation activity, you can tell how much someone is like willing to buy in and like participate, like when you ask them a question that's ridiculous like that too.
Yeah. Yeah. If they're saying like horse, or if they're like, I would take like a guinea pig combined with a dragon, like making something crazy up.
You're like, oh yeah, now we're talking. Tell me more. Yes, and no, that's so good. We'll definitely have that be your question. Are there any other favorites that you like to go to? Just because I like hearing these kinds of prompts. I'm big on um if you were a juice, what would you be? I like that one, and like I like hearing the justifications behind those things too. But
Yeah.
I used to in summer camp, I used to always ask kids what kind of juice they would be, and they're like, "What?" Is that, or they'd be like, "Well, I really like apple juice." I'm like, "No, no, no, not your favorite. What juice would you be?"
Yeah.
And they're like, some of them they don't want to really go along with it, and then some are like, "Oh yeah, duh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite's orange juice, but if I were to be a juice, it'd be banana guava." You
Yeah.
you're so banana guava. That makes so much sense. You, I've never looked at a person more and thought banana guava in the way that I'm thinking it right now. Yeah,
Oh yeah, definitely. I like what kitchen appliance would you be?
so good.
That's a fun one. What non-edible thing do you really want to eat?
Yeah, that's a great one.
That was a check-in question for a meeting at work a couple months ago, and it really sparked this conversation about how many people at my organization ate chapstick as kids.
Well, yeah, that that and that's the whole deal. You're just getting people to open up.
Hmm.
It's a how much lanolin is in your body in this moment. Um, we have to know. These are these are the things we've gotta figure out. Amazing. Well, Kate, do you have any closing thoughts or questions before we send it up into the sky?
Hmm. I feel like I want to say something profound, but it's like lost for me right now.
Yeah, you don't have to. You don't owe these people anything.
Yeah, that's my final thought is I don't owe you anything.
I love it. Well, Kate, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. It's always good to catch up with you. That's going to conclude episode 45 of When I Was Your Age. Thank you guys for making it this far into the show. If you have, go ahead and drop a chapstick emoji on the post on Instagram if you've made it this far. And we'll catch you in the next one.